Hello everyone, welcome back to Whisper Tales channel. Before we get started, comment below where you are from and what time you are watching. And did you know that 97% of you guys watching aren't subscribed yet? So make sure to subscribe and like. Alright, let's get into it. Story 1. The Vanishing of Kildare Station. Kildare Station was established in 1912 as a railway stop on a branch line connecting Edmonton to the scattered communities of northern Alberta. By 1967, the line had been abandoned, the tracks torn up for scrap, and Kildare Station had become just another dying hamlet, home to perhaps 50 people who stubbornly refused to leave. Percival Dunbrack was the station agent. He had been the station agent since 1949, continuing to maintain his title and his office even after the railway ceased operations. He was 73 years old, a widower, a man of rigid routines and unfailing punctuality. Every day at 6 a.m. he unlocked the station. Every day at 6 p.m. he locked it again. He had done this for 18 years without the railway, just as he had done it for 18 years with it. On the morning of September 3, 1977, Percival Dunbrack unlocked the station as usual. At 6:15 a.m., he stepped outside to check the weather, as he always did. He looked down the track bed, still visible despite the removal of the rails, toward the forest that had been slowly encroaching since the abandonment. He saw a train. It was impossible. There were no tracks. There had been no tracks for 5 years. But there it was, a locomotive emerging from the morning mist, pulling a single passenger car, moving silently along a route that no longer existed. Percival watched, frozen, as the train approached. It was old, older than anything he had seen in his decades of railway work. The locomotive was a model from the turn of the century, perhaps older. The passenger car was made of dark wood, its windows curtained, its exterior unmarked by any railway insignia. The train stopped at the station platform. After a moment, the door of the passenger car opened. A figure stepped out, a man in a dark suit and hat, carrying a leather briefcase. He approached Percival with the confident stride of a businessman arriving for an expected appointment. "Good morning," the man said. His voice was pleasant, ordinary, without any identifiable accent. "I believe I'm expected." I wasn't expecting anyone. The railway closed years ago." "Did it?" The man smiled. "How interesting. Nevertheless, here I am, and I have business to conduct." "What kind of business?" The man's smile widened. "The only kind that matters, Mr. Dunbrack. The business of debts and payments, of promises made and promises kept. This town owes a debt, you see. It was incurred long ago, and the payment is now due." Percival should have been afraid. Later, he would realize that he should have run, should have called for help, should have done anything other than what he did. But in that moment, facing the man from the impossible train, he felt only a strange calm, a sense of inevitability, as if this was something that had always been coming, something that could not be escaped. "What debt?" he asked. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. You only need to observe. That's your role, Mr. Dunbrack. It's always been your role. The station agent who sees everything, records everything, but changes nothing. Today, you will see the settlement of Kildare Station's account." The man walked past Percival, toward the town's main street. After a moment's hesitation, Percival followed. Kildare Station was waking up. Lights flickered on in windows, doors opened, people emerged to begin their daily routines. None of them seemed to notice the stranger walking among them. None of them reacted as he passed. The man stopped at the first house, the home of Wilhelmina Grundahl, a 60-year-old widow who had lived in Kildare Station her entire life. He walked up to her door, knocked 3 times, and waited. Wilhelmina answered. Her face went pale. "No," she whispered. "Not yet. Please, not yet." "The debt is due, Mrs. Grundahl. You knew this day would come. I thought we had more time. Time is not something that can be negotiated. Your family has had 55 years, a generous extension by any measure. Now the balance must be paid. Wilhelmina wept, but she nodded. She stepped back into her house and returned a moment later carrying a small wooden box. She handed it to the man with trembling hands. Is this everything? He asked. Everything. Every last piece. The man opened the box. Percival couldn't see what was inside, but he saw the light that spilled out, a cold, blue-white radiance that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Acceptable, the man said. He closed the box and continued down the street. One by one, he visited every household in Kildare Station. One by one, the residents produced boxes, bundles, containers, each one emanating that same cold light. Some wept, some begged, some went silently, their faces masks of acceptance. But all of them paid. By noon, the man had collected debts from every resident of the town. He returned to the station platform, where Percival still stood, too stunned to move, too confused to speak. And now for you, Mr. Dunbrack. Me? I don't owe anything. I only came here after the war. I wasn't part of whatever this is. Weren't you? The man's smile returned. You've been the station agent for 18 years. You've watched this town, kept its records, maintained its schedules. You've been part of its machinery, Mr. Dunbrack, even if you didn't know what the machinery was for. What was it for? Every town makes a bargain, one way or another. Kildare Station made its bargain in 1912, when the railway came. The founders wanted prosperity, wanted connection to the wider world, wanted all the things that isolated people. Want. And so a deal was struck. 55 years of growth and safety in exchange for what you've seen collected today. What was collected? What was in those boxes? The man's smile faded. For just a moment, something else showed through his pleasant mask. Something ancient and hungry and utterly inhuman. What do you think, Mr. Dunbrack? What is the only thing of real value that humans possess? The only thing that can be traded, collected, consumed? Percival understood. He felt sick. The town is paid in full, the man said. The bargain is complete. But you, Mr. Dunbrack, you have one final duty to perform. What duty? You must record what happened here. You must write it down, in the station ledger, in the official records. You must ensure that someone, someday, will know what Kildare Station really was. And if I refuse? Then you can join the collection. I'm sure there's room for one more. Percival recorded. He wrote through the afternoon and into the evening, filling page after page of the station ledger with everything he had witnessed. When he finished, the sun was setting, and the man from the train was standing before him once more. It is done, the man said. You have fulfilled your purpose, Mr. Dunbrack. You may go now. Go where? Anywhere. Anywhere but here. Percival left that night. He walked away from Kildare Station with nothing but the clothes on his back and the memories he would carry for the rest of his life. He tried to send people back. He contacted the RCMP, the provincial government, anyone who would listen. But when investigators arrived at Kildare Station, they found nothing. No buildings, no roads, no evidence that anyone had ever lived there. Just forest, slowly reclaiming land that had apparently never been settled. The official records showed no town called Kildare Station. No railway stop, no branch line, no history at all. Only the ledger remained. A book that Percival had somehow carried away without realizing it. A book that appeared on his doorstep in Edmonton 3 days after his departure. He kept it until his death in 1984, never showing it to anyone, never speaking of what it contained. His daughter found it when she was cleaning out his apartment. She opened it, read the first few pages, and closed it again. She burned it that same night. But sometimes she wonders. Sometimes, late at night, she thinks about what her father wrote, about debts and bargains, about the true cost of prosperity, about the impossible train that came to collect what was owed. And she wonders what her own town has promised. What payment might someday be due? Historians have attempted to verify the existence of Kildare Station. They have searched provincial archives, railway records, municipal documents. They have found nothing, no evidence that the town ever existed, no maps showing its location, no census records listing its residents. But they have found something else. In the personal papers of a railway executive named Cornelius Whitmore, archived at the Glenbow Museum in Calgary, there is a letter dated January 3rd, 1912. The letter is addressed to Whitmore's business partner, a man named Thaddeus Crane, and it contains a single paragraph that has puzzled researchers for decades. The arrangement has been finalized. The branch line to redacted will proceed as planned. The contractor assures me that all necessary provisions have been made. The entity has been satisfied, and we may expect 55 years of prosperity before the account comes due. I trust you will handle the arrangements when that time comes, assuming either of us is still alive to see it. The word provisions is underlined 3 times. The word entity is circled. No one knows what these terms meant. No one knows who or what the entity was. No one knows what kind of arrangement could guarantee 55 years of prosperity, or what the payment for such an arrangement might be. But the date is suggestive. 1912 plus 55 years equals 1967, the year that Kildare Station allegedly vanished. Percival Dunbrack died in 1984, taking his secrets with him. His daughter, Annalisa, died in 2019, never having spoken publicly about the ledger she had burned or the stories she had refused to tell. But before she died, she gave an interview to a local historian. An interview that was never published, that exists only as a recording in a private collection, that has been heard by fewer than a dozen people. In that interview, she said something that haunts everyone who has heard it. "My father saw the impossible," she said. "He saw a train that didn't exist come to collect a debt that couldn't be paid, and he spent the rest of his life waiting for his turn." His turn? To pay. Everyone pays eventually, he said. Everyone who takes from the darkness owes something to the darkness, and the darkness never forgets. The recording ends there. Annalise refused to say anything more. But sometimes, railway workers in northern Alberta report strange occurrences. Phantom trains on abandoned lines, signals activating on tracks that haven't been used in decades, the sound of a locomotive whistle echoing across the empty prairie. And sometimes, they report seeing a figure standing beside the tracks, a tall man in a dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Waiting. Story 2, The Children Who Came Back. Everilde Summer lost her daughter on August 12, 1984. Margaret was 8 years old, a bright and curious child with her father's brown eyes and her mother's stubborn streak. She disappeared from the backyard of their home in Pinegrove, a small community 20 kilometers east of Red Deer, while Everilde was inside preparing lunch. The search lasted 3 weeks. Every field was walked, every forest was combed, every well and pond and abandoned building was checked. The RCMP brought in dogs, helicopters, a psychic who claimed to see Margaret near water. Nothing worked. No trace of the child was ever found. Everilde and her husband Tormod grieved, as parents must. They held a memorial service, though there was no body to bury. They tried to continue their lives, though their lives now had a Margaret-shaped hole that nothing could fill. They never gave up hope. Even as the months turned to years, even as everyone else stopped looking, stopped asking, stopped remembering, Everilde kept Margaret's room exactly as it had been. She kept the window open, even in winter, just in case her daughter needed a way in. On August 12, 1997, exactly 13 years after she vanished, Margaret came back. Everilde was alone. Tormod had died the previous year, a heart attack that the doctors attributed to natural causes, but that Everilde knew was really grief, accumulated and compounded until it simply stopped his heart. She was sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea, when she heard the back door open. "Hello," she called. "Who's there?" Footsteps in the hallway. Light footsteps, child footsteps. Everilde's heart began to pound. A figure appeared in the kitchen doorway. It was Margaret. She looked exactly as she had on the day she disappeared. 8 years old, brown eyes, stubborn streak. She was wearing the same clothes, a yellow sundress, white sandals, a ribbon in her hair. There was no dirt on her, no sign of exposure or hardship. She looked like she had stepped out of the backyard 13 years ago and stepped back in now, as if no time had passed at all. "Mama," Margaret said, "I'm home." Everilde should have questioned it. She should have demanded explanations, should have called authorities, should have done anything other than what she did. But this was her daughter, her baby, the child she had mourned for 13 years. She ran to her and embraced her and wept. "Where have you been?" she asked finally, when the tears subsided. "What happened to you?" "I went away," Margaret said. Her voice was the same, too, high and sweet, with that little lisp she'd been working to overcome. "But now I'm back. Can I have some milk?" Everilde got her milk. She made her lunch. Peanut butter and jelly, no crusts, just like always. She watched her daughter eat, marveling at the impossibility of her presence, the miracle of her return. She noticed, but didn't acknowledge, the things that were wrong. Margaret's eyes didn't blink. Not once in all the time Everilde watched her. They stayed open, fixed, unmoving. Her movements were too smooth. No hesitation, no adjustment. Every gesture flowed into the next with mechanical precision. And when she smiled, her teeth were different. Too many of them. Too sharp. That night, Everilde couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the house, aware that her daughter was in the next room. Her daughter who should be 21 years old, her daughter who hadn't aged, her daughter who wasn't quite right. Around midnight, she heard Margaret's door open. She heard footsteps, not toward the bathroom, not toward the kitchen, toward the back door. Everilde got up and followed. Margaret was standing in the backyard, in the exact spot where she had disappeared 13 years earlier. She was looking up at the sky, her face illuminated by the full moon. "Margaret? Sweetheart, what are you doing?" The child turned. In the moonlight, Everilde could see her clearly, could see the wrongness she had tried to ignore. The too smooth skin, the too still eyes, the smile that stretched too wide. "I'm waiting," Margaret said. "They're coming." "Who's coming?" "The others. The ones who went away like I did. They're all coming back." Over the following weeks, Everilde learned that Margaret was not the only one. Throughout Pinegrove and the surrounding communities, children who had vanished years or decades ago were returning. All of them were exactly as they had been on the day they disappeared. No older, no different, no changed. All of them came back on significant anniversaries. All of them were wrong in ways their families tried desperately to ignore. Bertil Haugen returned to his parents after 16 years. He had been 4 when he vanished. He was still 4 when he came back. His parents were in their 70s now, frail and failing, but they welcomed their son with joy and relief and willful blindness. Inga Kjellstad came home after 22 years. She had been 12, and she remained 12. Frozen in time while her parents aged and her siblings grew up, and her childhood friends became adults with families of their own. Sven Lindquist, absent for 9 years. Christiana Bjork, gone for 17. One by one, the vanished children of Pinegrove returned, each one perfect, each one unchanged, each one somehow ineffably wrong. Dr. Astrid Moberg was the first to speak openly about her concerns. She was the town's only physician, a practical woman who had delivered half the babies in Pinegrove over the past 30 years. She had seen the returned children, had examined them at their parents' request, had found things that no medical textbook could explain. "Their hearts don't beat," she told Sheriff Leif Ormson. "Not in any normal way. They have a pulse, but it's wrong. Too slow, too regular. Like a clock, not a heart." "What are you saying, Astrid?" "I'm saying these aren't the children who disappeared. They look like them, they sound like them, they have their memories, but they're not them. They're something else." "Something else? What kind of something else?" Dr. Moberg shook her head. "I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. But whatever they are, wherever they've been, they came back for a reason. And I don't think it's a good one." The families refused to listen. These were their children, returned from whatever purgatory had held them for years or decades. They would not give them up. They would not submit them to tests or interrogations. They would not let anyone take their babies away again. And so life in Pinegrove continued, with an undercurrent of dread that everyone felt, but no one would acknowledge. The returned children didn't go to school. They didn't play with other children. They spent their days in their homes, doing nothing in particular, waiting for something they wouldn't name. At night, they gathered in the field at the edge of town, the field where many of them had originally vanished, and stood in silent communion, faces turned toward the sky. Everilde watched Margit slip out every night. She watched through the window as her daughter crossed the yard, climbed the fence, disappeared into the darkness. She never followed. She didn't want to know what happened in that field. But eventually, someone did. Bjorn Thomason was 17, a high school student with more courage than sense. He had watched the returned children gathering, had grown increasingly disturbed by their behavior, had decided that someone needed to find out what was really happening. On the night of September 23rd, he hid in the tall grass at the edge of the field and watched. The children arrived one by one, taking positions in a pattern that seemed random, but wasn't. A constellation, Bjorn would later realize, matching the configuration of stars that appeared overhead. They stood motionless, faces upturned, mouths open. And something came down. Bjorn couldn't describe what he saw. His mind refused to process it, refused to form memories that could be recalled in any coherent way. He remembered light. Not light from the sky, but light from inside the children, pouring upward like inverse rain. He remembered sound. Voices, perhaps, or something that used the shape of voices without any human meaning. He remembered the children dissolving. One moment they were there, standing in the field. The next, they were gone, replaced by columns of that impossible light, rising higher and higher until they merged with something waiting above. Bjorn ran home. He told his parents what he had seen. They called Dr. Moberg. Dr. Moberg called Sheriff Ormson. By the time they reached the field, it was empty. No children, no light, no evidence of anything unusual. But the next morning, every family with a returned child woke to find them gone. Margit's bed was empty. Her clothes were still in the closet. Her glass of milk from the night before sat untouched on the kitchen table. It was as if she had never come back at all. Everilde Summer grieved again. Grieved twice, for the same child, for the same absence. This time there was no hope to sustain her. This time she knew her daughter was truly gone, taken by something beyond understanding for purposes beyond comprehension. She kept Margit's room unchanged. She kept the window open, even in winter. Just in case. The Pinegrove incidents were never officially investigated. The returned children were never subjected to medical examination, never questioned by authorities, never documented in any official capacity. The families who had briefly housed them insisted that nothing unusual had happened, that their children had simply been found and then run away again, that the whole affair was a private matter, not subject to public scrutiny. But Dr. Astrid Moberg kept her records. She kept detailed notes on every examination she had conducted, every anomaly she had observed, every question she had been unable to answer. After her death in 2012, these notes were discovered by her nephew, a journalist named Eric Lindberg. Eric spent 3 years investigating the Pinegrove phenomenon. He interviewed surviving witnesses, examined historical records, searched for any precedent that might explain what had happened. What he found disturbed him deeply. The Pinegrove incidents were not unique. Throughout Alberta's history, there had been similar occurrences. Children who vanished without trace and returned years or decades later, unchanged, unharmable, wrong. Most of these incidents had been quietly covered up, the witnesses silenced, the evidence destroyed. But patterns emerged. The returns always occurred on significant anniversaries. 1 year, 7 years, 13 years, exactly. The children were always the same age as when they disappeared, and they always, without exception, gathered at night in locations associated with their original disappearances. And then they were gone again. Vanished, this time permanently, leaving behind only questions and grief. Eric's investigation led him to an old Cree woman named Morning Star Woman who lived on the reserve north of Red Deer. She was over 100 years old, the oldest member of her nation, the keeper of stories that had been passed down for generations. "The people who take the children," she said when Eric asked about the phenomena, "they are not people. They are not spirits. They are something else, something that exists between the world of the living and the world of the dead. They collect, they harvest, they take what they need and return what they don't." "What do they need?" "That I do not know. But our elders warned us, do not let your children wander alone. Do not let them near the thin places where the world grows weak. Because once the collectors notice a child, they will always come back. Always. Even if the child has grown up? Even if they're not a child anymore?" Morning Star Woman shook her head sadly. "To them, we are all children. To them, we are all small and lost and easy to take. The only difference is whether they find us interesting enough to collect." Eric never published his investigation. He said it would cause more harm than good, would raise questions that couldn't be answered, would terrify parents without offering any protection. But he kept his notes. And before he died in 2020, he sent them to a single correspondent, a university professor who specialized in folklore and unexplained phenomena. That professor has never spoken publicly about what she received. But sometimes, when pressed by students who have heard rumors about her research, she admits that she has read things that haunt her dreams. "There are things in this world," she says, "that we are not meant to understand. Things that operate by rules we cannot comprehend. Things that have been collecting from humanity since before we had names for them. What should we do about them? Nothing. There's nothing we can do. We can only hope that we never become interesting enough to catch their attention." Story 3. The Last Shift at Drumheller Deep. The Drumheller Deep coal mine opened in 1948 and closed in 1971, a 23-year span that saw 47 men die underground and hundreds more emerge with lungs blackened by coal dust and spirits broken by the brutal realities of extractive labor. By the time the mine shut down, it had burrowed nearly a kilometer into the earth, following seams of coal through rock that seemed, to the men who worked it, increasingly hostile to their presence. Ragnar Ness was the last man out of Drumheller Deep. He was 34 years old, a Norwegian immigrant who had come to Canada seeking opportunity, and found instead a lifetime of darkness and danger. He had worked the mine for 14 years, surviving cave-ins that killed his friends, gas leaks that left him gasping, accidents that should have taken his life, but somehow didn't. "The mine doesn't want me," he would say. "It keeps trying to kill me, but something won't let it." On the last day of operations, December 15th, 1971, Ragnar was assigned to the deepest section of the mine. His task was to recover the final equipment, to ensure that nothing of value was left behind when the tunnel was sealed forever. He went down at 6 a.m. He was supposed to return by noon. At 6 p.m., with no word from Ragnar, the mine foreman Casper Overland organized a search party. They found him at the very bottom of the mine, in a chamber that wasn't supposed to exist. According to the mine's blueprints, the tunnel ended 70 meters above where they found Ragnar. There was no record of any excavation beyond that point. No documentation of this chamber with its walls of smooth black stone and its ceiling lost in darkness above. Ragnar was sitting against one wall, his helmet lamp still on, his face fixed in an expression of absolute terror. He was alive, but unresponsive. His eyes were open, staring at something the rescuers couldn't see. His lips moved continuously, forming words without sound. They carried him to the surface. By the time they emerged, night had fallen, and Drumheller Deep was officially closed forever. Ragnar spent 3 weeks in the hospital, drifting in and out of consciousness, occasionally screaming words that no one understood. When he finally became coherent, the doctors asked him what had happened. His answer would haunt everyone who heard it. "There's something living down there," Ragnar said. "Something that's been there since before the coal, since before the rock, since before everything. We woke it up. Not today, years ago when we first started digging. It's been watching us ever since, watching and waiting." Waiting for what? For us to go deep enough, for us to find it. "What did you find, Ragnar? What's in that chamber?" Ragnar's face went pale. His hands began to shake. "A door," he whispered. "There's a door at the bottom of the earth, and something is trying to come through." He wouldn't say anything more. He was discharged from the hospital, returned to his small house in Drumheller, and spent the remaining years of his life in virtual isolation. He didn't work, didn't socialize, didn't do anything except sit in his living room and stare at the wall. He died in 1989. His body was found by a neighbor who had noticed his newspapers piling up. The cause of death was determined to be heart failure. But there was something strange about the scene. Something the investigating officers noted but couldn't explain. Ragnar's hands were positioned as if he were pressing against something invisible, fingers splayed, arms rigid. His face was frozen in that same expression of terror from 18 years earlier. And on the wall he had been staring at, a wall that had been blank for as long as anyone could remember, there was a mark. A dark circle, perhaps 2 feet in diameter, burned into the paint and plaster. In the center of the circle was a shape that might have been a doorway, or might have been something else entirely. The mark faded over the following weeks, but not before several people photographed it. Those photographs were collected by Dr. Oswin Kjærsgaard, a geologist from the University of Calgary, who had heard rumors about the Drumheller Deep incident and wanted to investigate. Oswin spent years researching the mine. He tracked down former workers, reviewed geological surveys, dug through provincial archives. Gradually, he assembled a picture that was far more disturbing than a simple case of mining trauma. Drumheller Deep had been plagued by strange occurrences throughout its history. Workers reported hearing voices from empty tunnels, seeing shadows that moved against the direction of their lamps, feeling presences that watched them with inhuman attention. 17 men had died in what were officially recorded as accidents, but which, according to witnesses, had been something else. Men falling into pits that hadn't been there a moment before. Men crushed by rockfalls that seemed deliberately targeted. Men simply vanishing and never being found. And the deeper the mine went, the worse the incidents became. "It's like the Earth itself didn't want us there," one former miner told Oswin. "Like we were digging into something that should have stayed buried." Oswin requested permission to explore the sealed mine. He was denied. He applied for government grants to fund, an expedition. He was rejected. He tried to organize a private exploration. The property owners refused. Finally, in 2003, he decided to go alone. The entrance to Drumheller Deep had been sealed with concrete, but time and weather had created cracks. Oswin enlarged these cracks until he could squeeze through, then descended into the darkness that had swallowed Ragnar Ness 32 years earlier. He was equipped with modern technology, LED lights, GPS trackers, satellite communicators. None of it would help him. His last transmission came from approximately 800 meters below the surface, near the point where the official tunnels were supposed to end. "I found the chamber," he said, his voice distorted by static. "It's not on any map. The walls are smooth, unnaturally smooth. And there's something else. Something..." The transmission cut out. Search and rescue teams found Oswin's equipment at the bottom of the mine, neatly arranged as if he had deliberately left it behind. His satellite communicator showed one final message, typed but never sent. "The door is open. It's been open the whole time. We just couldn't see it." Oswin Kjærsgaard was never found. The mine was resealed, this time with multiple layers of concrete reinforced with steel. Warning signs were posted. Security cameras were installed. But sometimes, late at night, the cameras capture something strange. A flicker of movement near the entrance. A shadow that doesn't correspond to any physical object. A brief glimpse of something that might be a face, or might be a door, or might be nothing at all. And people who live near the old mine site report hearing sounds from underground. Knocking. Continuous, rhythmic knocking. As if something very far down wants very badly to come up. The knocking was first documented in 1995, when a family named Thorkelson purchased land adjacent to the former mine site. They reported hearing the sound almost immediately. A distant, persistent tapping, seemingly coming from beneath their property. At first, they assumed it was groundwater, or geological activity, or the natural settling of abandoned mine tunnels. But the sound was too regular, too purposeful, too obviously intentional for any natural explanation. They hired geologists to investigate. The geologists found nothing unusual. No underground aquifers, no unstable rock formations, no evidence of mine collapse. They also noted, in their official report, that the knocking stopped whenever their recording equipment was active. "It was almost as if something down there knew we were listening," one geologist said in an interview, "and didn't want to be recorded." The Thorkelson family sold their property in 1998 at a significant loss. Every subsequent owner has reported the same phenomenon. The knocking, always present, always rhythmic, always seeming to come from somewhere impossibly deep. The current property owner is a corporation based in Calgary. They use the land for industrial storage, keeping heavy equipment and materials in warehouses built far from the mine's former entrance. Their employees have been instructed not to discuss the sounds they hear. Their security guards have been told that the knocking is environmental noise and should be ignored. But sometimes, late at night, when the warehouses are empty and the wind is still, the guards hear something else. Voices, distant, muffled, coming from beneath the earth, speaking words that are almost comprehensible, almost human, almost sane, saying over and over, "Let us up, let us up, let us up." No one has ever responded. No one dares. Story 4. The Inheritance of Blackmore House. Blackmore House was built in 1923 by Adelheid Stromberg, one of Alberta's first female ranchers, a woman who had built an empire of cattle and grain through sheer determination and an unwillingness to accept limitation. She designed the house herself, a sprawling Victorian structure utterly unsuited to the prairie landscape, with turrets and gables and a third floor that no one ever used. Adelheid lived in Blackmore House for 43 years, dying in her bed in 1966 at the age of 88. She left the property to her only living relative, a great-nephew named Gottfried, whom she had never met and apparently despised. Gottfried was 25, a law student in Vancouver, with no interest in ranching and less interest in Alberta. He sold the cattle, leased the land, and left Blackmore House to deteriorate while he finished his education and built his career. The house sat empty for decades. Gottfried's grandson, Maximilian Stromberg Vogt, inherited the property in 2015. By then, Blackmore House was a ruin. Roof collapsed in several places, walls eaten by mold, foundations cracked by decades of frost. The smart thing would have been to demolish it and sell the land. Maximilian was not smart. He was a romantic, a dreamer, a person who believed in the preservation of history and the redemption of forgotten places. He quit his job in Toronto, moved to Alberta, and began the work of restoring Blackmore House. His wife, Lieselotte, came with him. Their children, Joachim, 11, and Traudl, 8, came too, pulled from their schools and their friends and their ordinary lives to participate in their father's obsession. The work took 3 years. During that time, the family lived in a trailer on the property, while Maximilian directed contractors, consulted historians, and gradually brought Blackmore House back to something approaching its original grandeur. It was expensive, exhausting, and frequently frustrating. It was also dangerous. The accident started almost immediately. Workers fell from scaffolding, were struck by falling debris, suffered inexplicable injuries that slowed the project and drove up costs. 3 different contractors quit, citing bad feelings about the job. A structural engineer refused to enter the house after his first inspection, saying only that something in there doesn't want us here. Maximilian dismissed these concerns as superstition. Lieselotte was less certain. The children have been having nightmares, she told her husband after the first year. Joachim says there's a woman who stands at the foot of his bed. Traudl says she hears voices in the walls. It's an old house. It makes noises. Their imaginations are filling in the gaps. Max, they're describing the same woman. A tall woman in a black dress, with gray hair and sharp eyes. They've never seen a picture of Adelheid, but they're describing her perfectly. Maximilian promised to take their concerns seriously. He did not. The restoration was completed in the summer of 2018. The family moved in on August 15th, exactly 52 years after Adelheid Stromberg's death. That night, Lieselotte woke to the sound of footsteps above her. The master bedroom was on the 2nd floor. Above it was the 3rd floor, the floor that no one ever used, the floor that had been sealed since Adelheid's time. Maximilian had found the door to the 3rd floor stairs locked and boarded over during the renovation. He had not opened it. "Someone's up there," Lieselotte whispered. Maximilian listened. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, moving from one end of the house to the other and back again. "Probably settling noises," he said. "Old houses do that." "Houses don't pace, Max." He went to investigate. He climbed the main staircase to the 2nd floor, then walked to the door that led to the 3rd floor. It was locked, as he had left it. The boards he had placed across it remained in position, but the footsteps continued, directly above his head. Maximilian told himself it was a trick of acoustics, a quirk of the old construction. He told himself there was no one on the 3rd floor, could be no one on the third floor, and that his imagination was overactive from the stress of the move. He almost believed himself. The incidents escalated over the following months. Objects moved when no one was looking. Doors opened and closed on their own. The temperature in certain rooms dropped dramatically, regardless of the heating settings. And the children continued to see the woman. Joachim described her waiting for him in the hallway, blocking his path, staring at him with eyes that didn't blink. Traudl said she appeared in mirrors, standing behind her reflection, reaching out as if to touch her shoulder. Lieselotte begged Maximilian to leave. He refused. "I've put everything into this house," he said. "Our savings, our careers, 3 years of our lives. I'm not abandoning it because of creaking floorboards and overactive imaginations." "This isn't imagination, Max. Something is wrong here. Something is very, very wrong." He didn't listen. On Christmas Eve 2018, Traudl disappeared. The family had gathered in the parlor to exchange gifts. Traudl stepped out to use the bathroom. When she didn't return after 10 minutes, Joachim went looking for her. He found the bathroom empty. The door to the third floor stairs, the door that had been locked and boarded, stood open. Maximilian ran. He took the stairs 3 at a time, calling his daughter's name, his heart pounding with fear that he had refused to acknowledge for too long. The third floor was dark. His flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing furniture covered in dusty sheets, boxes stacked against walls, the accumulated detritus of a century. And at the far end of the hall, illuminated by moonlight from a dirty window, stood Traudl. She was facing away from him, looking at something he couldn't see. Her posture was rigid, unnatural, like a marionette held in place by invisible strings. "Traudl? Sweetheart, come here. We need to go downstairs." She didn't respond, didn't move. Maximilian approached slowly, his flashlight beam wavering. As he got closer, he saw that Traudl wasn't alone. Standing beside her, one hand resting on the child's shoulder, was a woman. She was tall, dressed in black, with gray hair pulled back in a severe style. Her eyes were sharp and cold and very, very old. Adelheid Stromberg looked exactly as she had in the photographs from 1923. "You came to my house," Adelheid said. Her voice was dry, dusty, like pages from an ancient book. "You took my house. You filled it with noise and movement and life. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I wouldn't care?" "Please," Maximilian whispered. "Please, just let her go. Take whatever you want, just let my daughter go." "I want what I've always wanted, Gottfried's blood. I want the debt to be paid." "I don't understand. What debt? What did Gottfried do?" "He was my heir. He was supposed to continue my work, maintain my house, carry on my legacy. Instead, he abandoned everything I built. He left me to rot while he pursued his own selfish life. And now his descendant comes here, thinking he can restore what was destroyed, thinking he can reclaim what was lost. But some things, once broken, cannot be fixed. I didn't know. I never knew any of this. I just wanted to preserve history, to benefit from my work without paying the price I paid, to reap without sowing, to take without giving." Adelheid's grip on Traudl's shoulder tightened. "Someone must pay, Maximilian. If not you, then perhaps your daughter, perhaps your son, perhaps your wife. Someone must always pay." In the stories, this is where the hero would find strength, would discover a weakness, would speak words of power, would somehow defeat the ancient evil. But Maximilian was not a hero. He was a romantic, a dreamer, a person who had led his family into a nightmare through willful ignorance and stubborn pride. He had nothing. "What do you want?" he asked. "Tell me what you want, and I'll give it to you." Adelheid smiled. It was a terrible smile, empty of warmth or mercy. "I want what I'm owed. 52 years of neglect, 52 years of decay. Someone must pay for every year, every month, every day. And you, Maximilian, you have a lifetime to give. Maximilian Stromberg Vogt walked out of Blackmore House that night, carrying his unconscious daughter in his arms. His wife and son met him on the lawn, where they had been waiting, too frightened to follow, too loyal to leave. "We're going," he said. "We're never coming back." They drove through the night, not stopping until they reached Calgary. They checked into a motel and slept for 14 hours, tangled together like survivors of a shipwreck. The next morning, Maximilian called a lawyer and arranged to donate Blackmore House to the Provincial Heritage Foundation. He took a loss on the renovation costs, gave up any claim to the property, and walked away from 3 years of work without looking back. The Heritage Foundation sent assessors to evaluate the property. They reported that the house was structurally unsound and recommended demolition. The demolition crew arrived in March of 2019. They worked for 3 days, tearing down the turrets and gables and the third floor that no one ever used. On the 4th day, the foreman called the Provincial Archaeological Service. They had found something in the foundations, something that had been there since before the house was built, since before the property was cleared, since before Europeans had ever set foot on the land. A chamber, carved from the bedrock, containing the remains of 47 people arranged in a circle around a central altar. And on the altar, preserved by some unknown process, was the body of a woman. She was dressed in indigenous ceremonial garments, her eyes open, her lips drawn back in a smile that revealed filed teeth. Carbon dating placed her death at approximately 600 years before the present. No one has ever explained how Adelheid Stromberg, born in 1878 in Edmonton, looked exactly like a woman who died 3 centuries before her birth. The Stromberg Vogt family never discussed what happened at Blackmore House. They moved back to Toronto, resumed their ordinary lives, and tried to forget. But sometimes, late at night, Maximilian still sees the woman in black. She stands at the foot of his bed, exactly as his children described, and she smiles that terrible smile. "Someone must always pay," she whispers, "and you haven't paid yet." Story 5. The Road to Nowhere. Highway 881 runs north from Lac La Biche into the wilderness of northeastern Alberta, passing through boreal forest and muskeg, serving oil sands workers and isolated communities. It's a lonely road, especially at night, when the only lights are your headlights and the only company is whatever lives in the dark between the trees. Kjartan Magnuson drove Highway 881 every week for 15 years. He was a truck driver, hauling equipment and supplies to the work camps that dotted the region. He knew the road intimately, every curve, every grade, every rest stop and gas station. He had driven it in blizzards and thunderstorms, in dawn light and midnight dark. He had never seen the exit. It appeared on a Tuesday in October of 2017, somewhere between Anzac and Fort McMurray. Jarton was making good time, running ahead of schedule, letting his mind drift as the kilometers rolled by. A sign emerged from the darkness. "Exit 147, 2 km. Kjartan frowned. There was no exit 147 on Highway 881. There were no exits at all in this stretch. Just the road, straight and endless, cutting through wilderness that had never been settled. He slowed down, watching for the exit. And there it was. A ramp leading off the highway, disappearing into the trees. A sign at the top read, "Nowhere, 15 km. Kjartan pulled over. He sat in his cab, engine idling, staring at the exit that shouldn't exist. Every instinct told him to keep driving, to ignore what he was seeing, to chalk it up to exhaustion and tricks of the light. But he was a curious man, and the exit was there. He took it. The road was paved but poorly maintained, cracks and potholes forcing him to reduce his speed. The trees pressed close on either side, their branches meeting overhead to form a tunnel of darkness that his headlights barely penetrated. He drove for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes. And then he saw lights. Nowhere was a town. It had a main street lined with buildings, a general store, a diner, a church with a white steeple, houses with lights in the windows. It looked like any small Alberta community, except for one detail. There were no cars, no trucks, no vehicles of any kind except his own. Kjartan parked on the main street and got out. The air was cold, much colder than it should have been in October. The silence was absolute. No wind, no animals, no human voices. The door of the diner was open. Light spilled out, warm and inviting. Kjartan walked toward it. Inside, the diner was empty. Tables were set with plates of food, hamburgers, fries, pie, but no one was eating. Coffee cups steamed on the counter. A radio played static. "Hello?" Kjartan called. "Anyone here?" No response. He explored the town. Every building was the same, occupied but empty, signs of life without any living presence. In the church, he found hymnals open on the pews, candles burning on the altar. In the general store, the cash register was open, money still in the drawer. It was as if everyone had vanished in a single moment, leaving everything behind. Kjartan returned to his truck. He wanted to leave, wanted to get back to the highway, wanted to forget this place existed. But when he turned around, the road he had come in on was gone. In its place was forest, unbroken forest, extending in every direction. Kjartan drove around the town, looking for an exit. Every road led to forest. Every path ended in trees. He was trapped in nowhere, in a town that shouldn't exist, in a place that had no exit. He tried his radio. Static. He tried his cell phone. No signal. He tried everything he could think of, and nothing worked. Night fell. Real night, not the perpetual twilight that had seemed to hang over the town since his arrival. Kjartan sat in his truck, engine off to conserve fuel, watching the darkness gather. And then he saw them. People, emerging from the buildings, walking onto the main street. Dozens of them, men, women, children. They moved slowly, deliberately, like sleepwalkers. Their faces were blank, their eyes unfocused. They gathered around his truck. Kjartan locked the doors. He started the engine. But there was nowhere to go, no road to escape, no path that led anywhere but here. The people began to knock on his windows, slowly at first, then faster. Their blank faces showed no expression, but their hands were insistent, demanding. One of them spoke, a woman perhaps 50, with gray hair and hollow eyes. "You came," she said. "You finally came. Who are you? What is this place? We are nowhere. We are the ones who were forgotten, the ones who went away and never came back. I don't understand. You will. You'll understand everything once you join us." Join you? Everyone who finds nowhere stays in nowhere. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. The knocking grew louder. More hands, more faces, pressing against the glass. Kjartan felt panic rising in his chest. "I don't want to stay. I want to leave. Please, just let me leave." "There is no leaving," the woman said. "There never was. You took the exit. You found us. Now you're ours." Kjartan closed his eyes. He thought about his wife, waiting for him in Edmonton. His children, who would wonder why their father never came home. His life, his ordinary, precious life, slipping away in this impossible place. When he opened his eyes, the people were gone. The town was gone. He was sitting in his truck on the shoulder of Highway 881, engine idling, headlights cutting through the October darkness. No exit, no road, no nowhere, just the highway, stretching north into the night. Kjartan drove home. He quit trucking the next week, took a job in the city, never drove Highway 881 again. But sometimes, late at night, he still sees them. The people of nowhere, standing at the edge of his vision, waiting for him to return. And sometimes, when he drives past exits on other highways, he catches a glimpse of signs that shouldn't exist. Signs pointing to places that aren't on any map. Signs pointing to nowhere. Other truckers have reported similar experiences. They speak of exits that appear and disappear, of towns that exist only at night, of people who knock on windows and ask to be let in. The Provincial Transportation Department has investigated these reports. They have found no evidence of any exit 147, any town called Nowhere, any road that leads off Highway 881 into the forest. But the reports keep coming. Every few months, someone new claims to have found the exit, to have visited the town, to have escaped at the last moment. And every few months, someone doesn't come back. Their trucks are found on the shoulder of the highway, engines idling, headlights on. The drivers are never inside. They're somewhere else now. They're nowhere. The Provincial Transportation Department maintains that Highway 881 is safe. They cite statistics showing accident rates comparable to other rural highways, traffic patterns consistent with regional norms, no evidence of any unusual phenomena. But they also don't explain why the highway has been repaved 7 times in the past decade, always in the same stretch. They don't explain why the street lamps in that section fail at a rate 30 times higher than the provincial average. They don't explain why maintenance crews refuse to work there after dark. And they certainly don't explain the recordings. In 2019, a trucker named Halfdan Vestergaard installed a dash cam in his cab after an insurance dispute. He was a seasoned driver, a skeptic, a man who believed only in what he could see and measure and prove. On November 3, 2019, his dash cam captured something that defied all three. The footage shows Highway 881 at night, exactly as you'd expect. Headlights illuminating asphalt, trees dark on either side, nothing unusual. And then, at the 3:47:22 mark, something appears. A sign. Exit 147, 2 km. The footage continues for another 6 minutes. It shows Halfdan slowing down, pulling to the shoulder, stopping. His voice can be heard, muttering in Norwegian, words that translation services have identified as prayers. And then the camera swings to the right, toward the exit ramp that shouldn't exist. The footage becomes corrupted at that point. Static, artifacts, digital noise that makes viewing impossible. But beneath the corruption, there are sounds, voices, dozens of them, speaking in unison, saying words that no one has been able to translate. The footage ends at 3:53:18. Halfdan Vestergaard was found the next morning, sitting in his truck, engine off, headlights dark. He was alive, but he couldn't speak. His mouth moved, his lips formed words, but no sound emerged. He has never spoken again. He lives in a care facility in Edmonton now, staring out the window toward the north, his lips still moving, still forming words that no one can hear. The dashcam footage was analyzed by experts in digital forensics. They found nothing wrong with the file, no evidence of editing, no signs of manipulation, no explanation for the corruption in the final minutes. They also found something that wasn't supposed to be there. Hidden in the digital noise, visible only when the contrast was adjusted in specific ways, was an image. A town, a main street, buildings with lights in windows, and people. Dozens of people standing in the street, looking toward the camera, looking towards Halfdan, waiting.